بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Completing the text نواقض الإسلام, the Nullifiers of Islam of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah. Last week we looked at Al-Ashir, the 10th of the Nullifiers, and so what's remaining is the conclusion. And when the author talks about the preventatives or that which is not a preventative from that which is not a preventative for the 10 that he mentioned. And this is a reminder from what we mentioned at the beginning, the first classes, that there are conditions or conditions and preventatives when it comes to takfir, declaring someone a kafir, or when someone falls into a nullifier from nullifiers of Islam. So the author, he says, rahimahullah, ولا فرق في جميع هذه النواقض بين الهازل والجاد والخائف إلا المكره. That there is no difference in relation to all these nullifiers if someone fell into it and he's one who was a hazil, one who was joking around, والجاد, someone who is serious, والخائف, one who is afraid, إلا المكره, except for one who has been compelled. And so here he's reminding us that if someone fell into one of these 10 nullifiers or any of the other nullifiers, then this person has fallen into out of the faith, unless they have, of course we looked at here, the preventatives. And we're going to see that he's saying there is no for such people. And why is it? Why did he mention these groups of people? There's no farq between them. And then the one who's mukrah, there's a farq. So here the ulama said hazil is one who's joking around, and therefore he does something out of a joke, and this will fall into like example of istihza. So someone can make the excuse, I was joking about Al-Islam, therefore I did a nullifier. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, قُلْ أَبِاللَّهِ وَآيَاتِهِ وَرَسُولِهِ كُنْتُمْ تَسْتَهْزِئُونَ لَا تَعْتَذِرُوا قَدْ كَفَرْتُمْ بَعْدَ إِيمَانِكُمْ. Is it Allah, His verses, or His signs, His messenger that you were mocking? Do not make any excuse, you have already fallen into disbelief after you believed. So here a person cannot say, I'm joking around and I committed shirk. I'm joking around and did something like this. So that's on one side, the hazil. As for the jad, the person who did it deliberately, this means that they have knowledge, that means they're aware. So obviously when someone is doing something deliberately, they're not from those who are exempted. We mentioned before someone who's ignorant, or someone who did it mistakenly, or someone who doesn't have intellect. And these examples are these preventatives. Someone who's serious. That means he has an intention to do this fi'l or lafz, this wording or action, ظاهرا or باطنا. He did it deliberately, intentionally, internally or externally. So that is another example. Show the person did it, then he is fallen to a nullifier of Islam. Al-Khaif, the one who is afraid, then each Shaykh says here, the one who's afraid, and what's meant is afraid for his money or his wealth. So in this case, a person out of fear, he falls into nullifier out of fear for his money and his wealth. And if you go to Kashf al-Shubuhat, Shaykh al-Islam, he talks about there a difference between the one who does something out of an excuse and one who doesn't have an excuse. And so we gave the example here of the person who was joking, no excuse. As a person whose life is on the line, then there is a difference. The person here can say on their tongue what's not within their heart. So for example, if someone was apprehended or caught by the disbelievers and told to disbelieve in Allah, otherwise you will be killed or harmed, then as we're going to see, the one who has been compelled, but one who is afraid, there's a difference between being afraid and being compelled, because there's ikhtiyar, there's choice. But if a person is in a situation where there's actual real threats, then they can move into the person's position of someone who's been compelled to harm to himself, his family, his wealth. But in any case, a person cannot say, I'm going to do a nullifier out of fear, just alone. But a person must be in a situation where his ikhtiyar, his choice is restricted, that then he's exempted. In that case, we'll see the person will say on his tongue that which is not in his heart. كما قال الله تعالى من كفر بالله من بعد إيمانه إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان. That's one who disbelieves in Allah after having faith in Him, and he is compelled, but his heart is firm or is full of Iman. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exempted a person on their tongue to say that which is not in their heart, to free themselves. As for someone simply fearing that someone will lose money or fame or opportunity or like this, then this is not an excuse. Rather, a person has to be compelled, in which there is, and again, scholars the categories, the one who is compelled into categories in the books of fiqh. So we take from this the point he mentioned all this, unless someone has one of the preventatives, then a person cannot make the excuse that he fell into it. Which goes back to what we said before, to remind ourselves of some of those preventatives, because the Shaykh, he didn't mention the one who was ignorant, right? But we did mention it before, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we go back to some of the preventatives we mentioned before. The ulama, when they talk about the preventatives, they say a person who falls into nullifier of Islam or any of the acts of disbelief, then their excuses are as mentioned. Number one, that the person who's fallen into has to be mukallaf or baligh aqil, a person who's above the age of puberty, a person who has aqil intellect, a person who's legally responsible. So mukallaf balighan aqilan, he has reached the age of maturity and he also has intellect. And therefore the ulama in the books of fiqh, they say if a child fell into an act of disbelief or apostasy, then they don't make the hukum on them, unless the child was mumayyiz, one who was able to distinguish right from wrong, which is around the age of 7. Then in this case there is a discussion, right, that this apostasy counts or doesn't count. Again, that's a discussion. But the benefit, the first one is someone was mukallaf, legally responsible, aqil balighan aqilan. The second one, al-dhikru, they have to be mindful of what they're doing. Hence the one who's nasi, who was forgetful, then they're exempted. And we spoke about this before. And so the man who, for example, he was so happy after his repentance that he said, "Oh Allah, you're my servant, I am your master," out of happiness, he was pardoned because it's a mistake, as we'll see. Then in the qasd, but also the fact that a person who's forgetful or a person who knew and forgot, there was a mani at that time. There was something that came between his knowledge or his ability because he was forgetful. So dhikr, he has to have remembrance, not forgetful. And number 3, al-ilm, knowledge, which we're going to come back to, not jahil. And number 4, al-qasdu, deliberation or intent, not the one who is mukhti, yani the one who is mistaken. كما قال الله تعالى وليس عليكم جناح فيما أخطأتم به ولكن ما تعمدت قلوبكم. However, there is no blame on you for that which you do mistakenly. However, that which you do deliberately with your hearts. وكان الله غفور رحيما. And verily Allah is all forgiving, all merciful. Ayah number 5, Surah Ahzab. And the last one here, Ash-Shart al-Khamis, al-Ikhtiyar, willingness, and willing to be able to willfully or wantfully doing something, and choice, having the choice. Hence, the one who's compelled, we said, is exempted. So from these, we see then a person, if he has one of these, meets the conditions and removes the preventatives, the person is pardoned. But the idea then is a person from these, we don't find, like the ones the Shaykh mentioned, the person who's joking around. He still has knowledge, still has awareness, he still has a choice. And if he doesn't, then of course that is a preventative then. Another example is somebody who does it seriously, deliberately, but then he was ignorant. So that gets into the issue of jahal, because jahal is the one where you find most commonly spread and the confusion often there. We mentioned last week some of those examples, but we just want to touch on one more time, that the reminder that people who are ignorant of something, they're not the one who knows. And therefore the ulama, when they divided this issue, some of them between the usul and furu', some of the ulama didn't accept that categorization, that there is no udhr. There's udhr for the issues which are furu'i, subsidiary, or khafi, hidden, and those which is jari, open, or that which is usul. They said, no, this is not correct. Because Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, he didn't even agree to the division of the deen between usul and furu'. Aslan, and this is salah is, according to this categorization, furu' wa not usul. So this is what Ibn Taymiyyah says, it's even correct, wrong to say this. The deen, all of it, we should take as usul. That's how we should be treating it. But the problem is now, imagine someone who is ignorant, genuinely ignorant. It's not fair then to say that person is not excused. And that's why if we go back to what Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, because a lot of the discussion, right, without getting to depths of it, it goes around the same points. Is there such thing, is there not? There is. But what's interesting is how we can see that if somebody falls into something, thinking that that thing they fell into was actually deen, it's not like someone fell into something haram knowing that it was wrong, or had the capacity to learn it was wrong that didn't. So we said last week the one who's pardoned for his ignorance is the one who did something, didn't know was wrong, or didn't have access to learn that was wrong. So if the person didn't have the access, they could be liable if they didn't access the knowledge or to seek it. But their jahal, what they did out of jahal, it can be pardoned. For example, they prayed the wrong way. They could be pardoned for what they prayed But the question is still lying, did you have access to learn better than what you did? But before going there, we have to understand that such a division allows us to know that it's possible, حتى في نواقض الإسلام, that people who are ignorant of the Masail of Deen to that level, Masail of Tawheed, especially nowadays, when the people of Bid'ah are plentiful and the Shubuhat are widespread. We should not be imagining that everybody knows the Tawheed the way we know it. So that would be an imagination. Because if that's the case, you can go home and test to yourself, your own family members. Masail which are usul that we all know, they don't know. Asma Sifat, Tawheed al-Ibadah, Dua, anything you ask and they'll get it wrong. And you're thinking like, billah. That's the reality. We have to be fair. Because some people, the way they look at it, as if everyone's, mashallah. Here, Shaykh Mu'athim, if you want more, you go to his kitab, Sharh Mumti', someone wants a nice speech, volume 6. In there, from the page, around page 194, all the way down. Shaykh has beautiful speech and discussion, and very fair. And in there, he mentions the difference between somebody who was ignorant and someone who wasn't. The one who had an excuse, and he actually had a doubt, the one who didn't. But he gives the example of people who, for example, are worshipping idols and the likes, not knowing that this is prohibited because the access that he has to knowledge are people of bid'ah who told him this is actually haqq. So an example, he says, based on this, if some of the Muslims in the lands, he said Muslims in some of the aqtar al-Islamiyya, some of the Muslim countries who seek assistance or refuge and aid from the dead, and they don't know that this is haram, rather they've been deceived to think that this is drawing near to Allah, and that this wali, or this person is a wali, a wali min Allah, he's an ally of Allah, and the likes of these doubts, while the person believes himself to be a Muslim and he himself has religious or has protective jealousy for the deen and believes in it and practices it. But here he has been confused, and these people are excused, he says, and we don't take them like those who are we don't consider them like the one who is a mu'anid, the one who is stubborn, the one who Allah says in the Quran that when they were told about worshipping what their forefathers worshipped, they say, إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. That they're not like, they say that we found our forefathers upon a way and we follow them there. It's not like the same, he says. And so the point he's mentioning here is that it's possible that they exist, and we know this, but the fairness because they're ignorant. And the reason why he's saying this is what we said last week. A person will be considered ignorant if they actually didn't know something and they didn't have a doubt regarding what they did know. So they didn't really have a doubt about what they were doing. They actually thought it was truth. And number two, the access to the knowledge that they had wasn't there, or was to people who are misguided. Another fatwa we mentioned last week, but he said if somebody in his mind came a doubt about a particular action, or whether it's something of an opposition to the deen, وَلَيْسَ عِنْدَهُ, and he doesn't have with him any of the ulama to clarify to him such things, then this person, in this case, في هذه الحال يكون معذورا. This person is pardoned in this situation. So then he puts then two things. Number one, the person who actually had doubt. That person has doubt, he's wajib upon him to seek knowledge. If he doesn't, he's liable. But the one who didn't have doubt in his head, so he actually thought he was doing his haqq, he thought it was Islam, he actually didn't think it was wrong. And then number two, right, he didn't, and the next person, so that's the first one, he has no doubt, therefore he's ignorant, he didn't even think he was wrong. So that person will be educated. Now a person who has a doubt, and then he has no access to people of knowledge, then that person is also ma'dhur, because he tried to learn, but then the people who learn don't know anything. So here we can take the difference between someone who knows something's wrong and doubtful, has access to knowledge, and then didn't do anything about it. This person, we're going to say, is not ma'dhur. And what does it mean? What does it mean to have doubt? Some of the ulama, they say it means in your head you have shak. This is right or wrong. That's sufficient. That's liable. Now you're liable to ask. So that's enough. Some people, when they say I have confusion, I don't know, that's enough. If you don't know, you have to ask. You can't just say, I'm going to just sleep. So the idea is, imagine somebody one day is confused about how he's praying. Is this the right salah or not? What's wajib on him? Has to go to the masjid or ask somebody, can you please teach me how to pray? But a person didn't have that doubt and was praying like this all his life. Is it possible he's ma'dhur? It can be if he actually thought this was the correct salah. But obviously the question will be like, his whole life no one told him this is wrong. Right? This is what we have to say. But possibly somebody probably told him. But look, the ulama said, the man will pray poorly. وقت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أبو بكر عمر عثمان علي are there, yet he's praying poorly. كيف? Because some of the fuqaha, they say the udhr bil-jahl is, if the knowledge is widespread, there's no udhr. And that's not correct. Because this man is in time of Rasulullah, and he's praying poorly, and Nabi Sallallahu is right there. And he told him, go back, pray 3 times, he didn't get it right. So they say, look, how is it possible someone in the waqt of Rasulullah and the Sahaba are kathirun, yet he's praying wrong? Because never in his head did he think this is the wrong salah. And he said, Rasulullah, I don't know any better. So there we can see that the proof of that, if somebody is in that state, woefully ignorant about something, then he's ma'dhur. But then the problem we have is that only Allah knows. But we also know ourselves best. If you had shak about something, we can't tell you it's ma'dhur. That happens all the time. Someone read something online, it's halal, haram, bid'ah, sunnah, is this? Now you're liable to ask. And number 2 then, when you go to ask, is there someone to teach you? If there is, then you have to go to them and ask. If there is nobody, if you can't get access on the internet or calls or anything, then you try your best. Or you ask someone and he told you the wrong answer. So there are some people legitimately went to the masjid, they asked them, they told him mortgage halal. We're going to tell that guy. He's jahil, right? Because he's jahil, he is jahil. He asked the person, the guy said halal. The imam, not everybody else, the imam said, what are we going to do with this person? We're going to tell him ma'dhur. He's tried. But the mistake is that the person he asked, he didn't know this person was guided. Later on, he will learn. The benefit we take from that, there is rahmah for the people. But the problem is that only Allah knows the situation of everybody. And that's why people have to be very careful, because they cannot tell themselves, I'm ma'dhur, I'm jahil. You could be jahil, but you have access to learn. And it's very important, because in today's time, we have a lot of access, and we have to take advantage of that. And one more thing connected to this, the ulama, when they talk about this, the reason why they're getting there is because a lot of the confusion is that no one doubts between Ahl Sunnah wal Khawarij on these 10. And we mentioned before, Shaykh Islam stopped these 10 and mentioned them mainly, even though he says, continuing, وَكُلُّهَا مِنْ أَعْدِ مَا يَكُونُ خَطَرًا. This is what he said. All of these are the most dangerous of the nullifiers, وَأَكْثَرِ مَا يَكُونُ وُقُوعًا. And they happen most likely. So he considers these the most dangerous of them, and also the most commonly fall into. And so for those reasons, he put these 10. Although some of the scholars, they disputed on whether there should be other ones in there or not, but no doubt these 10 are agreed upon. But what we take from this is that this is what he's telling us. Ahl Sunnah and the Khawarij, we all agree. What's the difference though? Ahl Sunnah and Jama'ah, we're fair. We have insaf and justice. We don't just declare them kuffar. But Ahl Khawarij, they take these and they weaponize it. Because they don't, the Udab al-Jahl, they look at their way they understand it. Until if you were to think about it carefully, it wouldn't be possible then, right, for them to read these 10, except that what they're going to be telling people that anyone who has these 10s out. So we have to be fair with that point. And then he finishes, فَيَنْبَغِي لِلْمُسْلِمِ أَن يَحْذَرَهَا, that he be careful of these and beware of them. وَيَخَافَ مِنْهَا عَلَى نَفْسِهِ, that he be very fearful of himself for it. But that's the benefit of studying this book, to be scared of kufr and shirk. If Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Imam of Tawheed, was scared for him and his family of shirk, then where are we, right? Where are we from that, right? وَجُنُوبَنِي وَبَنِي أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. That's what he was worried about. Allah save me and my children from worshipping idols. So us, we have to take these 10 and we teach the people in order to guide them. But when it comes to a person who doesn't know any better, and legitimately, then we can say, okay, you're excused, but here's now the Iqamat al-Hujjah, here I am. And we said before, Iqamat al-Hujjah doesn't mean a person has to understand it perfectly, right? He just have to have fahm, mutlaq al-fahm, just general understanding of what has been told. So that's another thing too. The person reached them, the knowledge. Like someone told you something's haram, and here's the proof, and here's who said it. Now you know, you can't say I'm ignorant now. And if you're not convinced, then point you to go and research more then, ask. So that's our job. That's what we should be putting ourselves to continue to guide the people. But the last point I want to mention, right, before closing, is that if you understand all of this, the benefit of this book allows us also to be careful of falling into extremism, but also to be mindful of the hal of the Muslimin, right, before and today, right? When Shaykh Islam wrote this book, that was a time period with a lot of kufr and shirk, and this was his goal, to guide his community. This is what we should be doing. Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah. Ahl Sunnah Jama'ah, we talk about Tawheed awwalan wal akhirah, always Tawheed, and we have to continue to teach and explain it. But we must also understand the levels in which what's happening now. In the ulama, when they talk about these kinds of books and the need for it, is the fact that the shubuhat are increasing. And this is because Ahl Bid'ah are plentiful, they're using the online platforms. So Ahl Sunnah, we have to also increase our knowledge of Aqeedah and Tawheed, strengthen it more and more in order to deal with that. And this will also lend strength to the idea that there is more ignorance. Because what was considered before from the thawabit or usul al-deen now has become even doubtful for some people. As we see online, people are fighting over what now? Not the small detail, we're talking about usul now. Astaghfirullah, people are debating on everything under the sun. So therefore it requires us to be more into explaining and having better understanding of this, and also understanding that some people can be misguided and be ignorant. Hence our job is to clarify. And one last point, if someone is ignorant, it's not like the one who's knowledgeable. But it's also not allowed for a person to remain ignorant. That's also the reminder. A person, if they say, I am ignorant, then there's nothing to boast about anyways, right? That's the thing. And all of us are ignorant to some degree, so that's why studying these books again and again allows us to increase our knowledge. Shaykh Ibn is saying, نعوذ بالله من موجبات غضبه وأليم عقابه. We seek refuge in Allah from that which necessitates his anger and wrath and the severity of his punishment. وصلى الله على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, anyone have any questions? بإذن تعالى, we'll take it. Yes. Yeah, so the brothers ask people like this who fall into these major kufr and shirk, and we can't reach them to give them hujjah, or they live in a place where they even think this is correct, or the people are misguided, so telling them. Then some of the ulama say obviously the dealing with them, between them and Allah, they can be ma'dhur, yes, as you mentioned. But between ahkam al-dunya can be different. For example, we know that someone could be treated by the Muslims as a kafir. If they did shirk and kufr, we don't know if this person has an excuse. And we can't act upon it because we act upon zahir, right? What's between him and Allah. So that's some discussion. Some of the ulama say that we should treat them as ignorant. Again, this is where there's some discussion about how to deal with it. Generally speaking, we know someone's doing kufr zahir, we judge ala zahir. So some say ahkam al-dunya, as you treat him as a kafir, ahkam al-akhirah, between him and Allah. Whereas others will say if someone like this is doing this and lived in a place or a time where it's ignorant, and we can see this, and they said La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. It's not the same than a kafir asli, this person. And the reason why that's important is that we could be case by case that we don't know this person. So generally, if someone says they're Muslim, we treat them as Muslimin because we know from Biliqeen he came with the Shahada. As for what he's doing, we know it's haram, but he could have shubhat. But at the end of the day, whatever the situation is, we hope Allah will forgive them. That's our intent. We hope good for them, and we don't know who's forgiven or not. So our job, pardon or not. So we make dua for them, Allah guide them, and we try to ourselves do best and try to make sure we can connect the people to those people who can guide them. But that's where the discussion comes in terms of ahkam al-dunya. Allahu alam, yeah. Allahu alam. Yes, Sheikh. Why is Udh bil-Jahl so controversial? Because the ulama debated it, let alone the awam. So the ulama, some of them, they didn't see that there's such things as Udh bil-Jahl in the masail of tawheed wal aqeedah, which are jaliyan, something clear. Jaliya or zahira, they said there's no such. Hence, the ulama who did say, they found that to be a weak position and they argue with them. And some of them, they found also that the ulama, when they debating it back and forth, that those who took the view of Udh bil-Jahl were becoming closer to the group called the Murji'ah. And this is not true. So since the ulama were debating and it became heated between them, then it became then a way for the Khawarij, Ahlul Bid'ah, to walk in there too and take sides against our Mashaykh by accusing them of being Murji'ah and having Irja, and they themselves are Khawarij. What are they talking about? Khawarij can have a nar. What are you doing in this conversation? You yourself have Mashakil. But this is what's happening. They're coming and weaponizing these discussions. So Ahlul Sunnah Jama'ah, we have adab when they debate. But this is a problem. Also, there are some people who they didn't understand the details of the mas'ala, how detailed they can get. Hence, even they didn't have the full issue, and then they went even more extreme than what the ulama were discussing. So that's why these kinds of issues, we encourage the brothers when these kinds of issues, not to busy ourselves too detailed with it. For the masail that the ulama debated, bain Ahl Sunnah, that would give us enough comfort. But if someone wants to do it, then there are mashallah good books to read, and inshallah that will suffice. But some people becomes like an obsession all the time, Udh bil-Jahl. And they're staying there themselves, wonder, are you ma'dhur bil-Jahl yourself? Because other masajid you're jahil, right? And so this is another problem too. Some people, you find them, that's all they're studying. And then the waqt we're in, we need to increase our knowledge. May Allah give us tawfiq. Yes, brother. So something like this, where someone doubts the preservation of the Quran, is the basics of the deen, but it's possible he has shubuhat. That's why we go back to a person's level of knowledge. Right? If it's a person of knowledge saying this supposedly, then this is a serious question mark. You cannot, because you have ilm, he's supposed to know better. But let's say some Ami person, he heard a qira'at, al-ahruf, and he got lost. Yes, this question, inshallah, he could have shubuhat, yes, because these are some difficult topics. Some of the Muslims who are practicing don't know the details of them, imagine. So some ulama say these kind of issues, where someone will say, I have doubt about the preservation, we have to ask him, what do you mean? That the Quran is not the book of Allah? Or some of the ahruf or not mutawatir. So we have to also make tafsir. What is he trying to say? But it's right. No Muslim who believes that Muhammad says the Quran is the book of Allah. I don't know of any Muslim. Because what is he praying? What does he do? What kind of belief is he? There's basics of Iman. There's no such. But there are some who say that the Quran is not preserved, and what they might be intending, some of the ahruf are lost. And we tell them, okay, then what did that issue ulama talked about? It's not something to be cause alarm. So they have to be very careful also to explain, but we can see the difference between ignorant and knowledgeable. Right? And these kinds, that's why, because some of these issues they go very deep into. So we hope our best job is to clarify the person. And after that, there's still sin, and then we say this person has serious issue in Aqidah. They can be done the preservation of Quran. Right? That's very serious. Yes. So we mentioned before the Qadianis and groups like this, or the Shia and others, the general idea is these groups are not Muslims. But they could be amongst them those who are ma'dur, only Allah will know their hal. So we don't necessarily say who is and who isn't. So that goes back to the brother's question, should we treat them as kuffar or not? They're not Muslims, according to our belief. But some of the ulama say, knowing that they say the shahada, give them da'wah, just bring them to Islam. That's what we're supposed to do anyways. But you're right, they're not Muslims, they're not. But they can be, yes, ma'dur inda Allah, yes, because some of them are just following everything they're following. But again, we have to go back to what we said before. Someone's jahl, only Allah knows that situation. He could have doubt himself in his life. I mean, some of them, the whole life, could think this is Islam. Because the Qadianis are very, they try their best to trick the people and saying this is Islam, right? Because they say that this is Muhammad sallallahu and this is Isa and A'udhu Billah, right? So it's possible, yes, but may Allah guide them, yes. So istighad, all those issues of aqidah, somebody who has mistaken the people of knowledge, this is very different, right, than the person who's ignorant. But the person knowledge himself could have shubhat, of course. That's what they fall into. The false, we said ta'wil, false interpretation is one of the mawani', preventatives. So yes, they also have those. But the levels obviously is different. So us, we say the Ahlul Bid'ah from the past until now, they're on the same way. Ahlul Bid'ah, they don't reinvent the wheel. They're upon the same way as the people before them. So just like when it comes to Mu'tazila, about Allah's attributes or about different issues that they believe in. No one may takfir them due to the depths of their doubts. This is the asr. We consider Ahlul Bid'ah and we don't make takfir because takfir requires a lot more other conditions. So that's important to know that people actually have doubts. And sometimes we forget, but we're not going to say this person then is 100%. We don't know exactly what level of doubts, but our job is to da'wah to refute. But yes, they're Ahlul Bid'ah. What they say, the difference people have is that Ahlul Bid'ah, they don't say or don't make inkar and juhud, just like this. Rather, they make inkar from their false ta'wil. So some ulama say, why are they different? Ash'aris, why they not? We don't make takfir of them. The Ash'ari don't fall into denying the attributes out of juhud and inkar. They're trying to preserve Allah's attributes, and from the ta'wil came that. From the lawazim of their qawl came this. So it's different than someone like the Jahmi who just says Allah doesn't have no attributes, no names, nothing, just wujud, mutlaq. This is a kafir. So sometimes we conflate them, it's a big difference. But we're going to say the no Ahl Bid'ah. That's how we should do it. And that's why you look at the fatwa of ulama, that's how they treat them. That's how we should. We follow our ulama, how they treat them, and salaf, how they used to deal with them. But the goal is to understand now that they are poisoning the people who are lay people. So that's why our job should be, how can we help people to see this is wrong? Because this is where we are today. We're fighting here now. We're fighting at this level. May Allah make it easy. Yes. Yeah, so we respond to this kind of, we talked about the hadith size class, but mutawatir ma'nawi or sometimes mutawatir bifi'l or urf. So there's mutawatir hadith, so why are you taking one and not the other? Sometimes they don't even know the hadith, they're just following because everyone's doing it. And that's where they get the afkar from. They get it from the people who they follow too. Right? So the same bad state, right? They just take it from another Orientalist. He's not even thinking. So we tell them this choosing and picking, that's not how the Muslim is. And it's also a mistake because something is mutawatir alfaz, its wordings, or mutawatir ma'na, or fi'l or urf. So if you accept one, you accept another. But what they do is they follow the hawa. That's what they do, right? So they just say coming and this is da'if and sahih, and we tell them, but then the salah you're praying, you have no idea where you got it from. Right? So this is a problem. So we tell them this is wrong. This is not even methodology anyways. It's not ilm anyways. Anyone who's talking about this is not ilm. But that's why if you go back to the class, we talked about how to respond from that to them properly, right? Properly. Barakallahu feekum. Last question, inshallah. So we spoke about that, the issue of mocking deen and our responsibility. I think under the sixth one we spoke about it. And we said that a person who's doing it, they have their hukum and you have yours. Your hukum should be always to advise them. But if you didn't, it doesn't mean you're a kafir unless you agree to that what they're saying. Just like if someone's mocking deen, you make sit with them and you have a pleasure of what they're saying, approval. But just sitting with them and not saying anything is sinful. But you should speak up or get up and leave. That's what you're supposed to do. But let's say someone made a joke or didn't know. For example, many Muslims, they don't know it's not allowed. So they have these now TikTok and these channels, people are making fun of Salah. So what do? When we show that, you show them this is wrong, and you get upset and you say we can't watch that, and that person will get the message. But now, if you didn't say anything and you don't approve it, you're not a kafir. Because in order for you to be also, you have to be pleased with it. But you're sinful for not saying anything, and that's not Islamic too. But someone who you know is showing something wrong and you didn't say anything. So it's only kufr when you agree to it as well, and you think it's also acceptable and you this is something fine. So may Allah guide us all, inshallah, barakallahu feekum.